Hello everyone, this is Viking with a W. I'm back and I'm back with another episode of doing some comparisons when it comes to data in the Pokemon market. Now, I read one comment from a viewer and thank you for that comment. It gave me the idea of how to structure the next video, and coincidentally, this is something I wanted to tackle also currently, as I think in the terms of what is currently going on in the market. You might have seen that in the past, mostly like English Pokemon cards were the go-to cards, or even the products that were only English were like collectible and investable. And sometimes you heard something along the lines that Japanese are collectible. These days, the spillage is also going somewhere where the Japanese Pokemon cards are also seeing some bright lights because the prices on the English cards and products are going very high. And in terms of budgeting, people also try to collect the cards that they like. And if they see like a huge and big price tag, they pivot to somewhere where it makes actually sense. In this case, when it comes to Japanese products, it makes sense, right? They are lower in terms of the pricing, and overall, the quality is way higher than the English product. So you're getting some good money for what you are buying, even though you don't understand the language, don't know what it's written there. But in terms of the collectible aspect, and if you are a fan of the art or the Pokemon and collecting, not necessarily investing, then it makes more sense for you. But since we are a Europe investor channel, what I wanted to cross over to is something similar for us, which might probably make sense for Europeans. And I know that these days also like Chinese Pokemon cards come into the foreplay, but why look at a market that is outside of our reach, and when we actually have something tangible here in our midst, which is not necessarily like probably the correct thing to do to when you do the collecting and investing, but it might probably make sense similar to the Japanese and Chinese products and cards, just because of the fact that there are some factors that tie into the notion of why we should probably collect German products and cards. Now I'm going to give you two examples why this might be a good idea. One being the nostalgia factor when we were young, when our, I don't know what was the age back then, 15, when we first saw Pokemon. We in Europe mostly didn't see this in English. I mean, for the majority of part, because even like the German market is really big, if not the biggest in Europe. And we've seen that the German Pokemon franchise was not streaming, but it was on the television on a daily basis, and we didn't know that there's an English equivalent. So you might have heard like the equivalent of the Charizard being like Glurak, or Squirtle being Shiggy, or Bulbasaur being Bizazam, and stuff like that that some of you might probably remember if you are old like me, or even older, probably even like the today's kids that watch Pokemon in German know these terms way better than I do. But for the part of the market, what I see is that if there's a market that probably would have the buying power to invest or collect in this language, it would be German for Europe. Why? Well, primarily also that the market covers, like for example, Austria, Switzerland, and Germany, because those are German-speaking countries. I'm not saying like other countries aren't, but because they might have also like German citizens and everything. But the majority of these German-speaking countries, I know that Switzerland is not in the majority; it's like one quarter. But having the nostalgia factor tie into all of this is that if you look at the cars in German, it hits like an interesting spot also. So I think personally, based on the data that I've researched, this also can reflect on the prices when investing, for example, in booster boxes and specialty sets. So I would like to bring this up to the forefront. a little bit, maybe something to speculate about. So when you look at current pricings for Mega Evolution sets, here you have the English pricing, current pricing on card market, and here is the German pricing. If you look at it in like a broader view, in some cases they are not that different. However, in some cases there is a little bit of a bigger gap. And also look at the current supplies, like these were taken yesterday, also the prices. What we can see as we move down the line of each era, as the supply dwindles, the price gap starts to mimic the price in English in some way, shape, or form. So not taking this particular era into consideration because this is still ongoing, if we look back at the Scarlet and Violet era, which is not that far behind, let's look at some examples when it comes to base set that is somewhat similar. Paldea evolved, 120 euros difference for a very strong set if you think about it. And you know that there's the Chase Magikarp in that, for example, right? So probably makes sense still to buy something like this if you are a fan of German, and probably even when you thought about it in the past, and if you are a buyer of German products, you might even have the experience of seeing like, hey, this is a very good price point still. Because if you also look at Obsidian Flames, there's almost 100 euros difference. 151, strong set. Still, in German, not that far off. Paradox Rift, something similar, even though it's a weaker set. Paldean Fates, there's a bigger gap here, but what would that gap actually mean? In my mind, it feels like there's a potential buying opportunity, but I'm going to speak about why it might be a buying opportunity in the later eras where the numbers actually make more sense. So going down the line, Temporal Forces, not that big of a gap. Twilight Masquerade, not that big of a gap. Shrouded Fable, almost none. Stellar Crown, none. Surging Sparks, 50 euros-ish. Prismatic Evolutions, there's like 40 to 50 euro gap. Journey Together, not that much. Destined Rivals, somewhat interesting price opportunity here, I would say. Black Bolt, still lower. White Flare, in German, still lower. Now this is the current era, so you already start to see like a trend forming where the stronger sets actually are more investable even in German. What about the previous era? Now let's look at Sword and Shield. Base set, a huge gap. What does it actually mean? We might not know particularly, but when you come to the supply number, it's actually very low. And this is a combination of all the languages that are on the current card market listing, meaning that even not the German products are that many available, right? Rebel Clash 50 euros with 46 products still available. Darkness Ablaze. Interestingly enough, this one is actually valued higher with the low amount that's there. Can it be that it's actually the, let's call it Glurak effect, right? We might not know, but it seems that it's something tangible in some cases. Champion's Path, very same pricing. Vivid Voltage, also very same. Shining Fates, very similar. Battle Styles, this is a weaker set, so I think the trend with weaker sets will be always that in German they will be even weaker than the English sets, not that investable. Chilling Rain, also somewhat weaker, but still a good pricing overall when you consider like MSRP being somewhere around, I don't know, 120 euros was it? I cannot really recall. I was buying somewhere along those lines always. Evolving Skies. Now, this one is fairly interesting, like such a great set overall, like the best set of that era. Almost 1,000 euros difference. So I would consider this somewhere in the lines of probably being still a good opportunity. Celebrations, a little bit too far off. Diffusion Strike, 200 euros difference, but still, if you think about the price for Fusion Strike in German, 555 euros, that's quite good, right? Moving on, Brilliant Stars, still a difference. Astral Radiance, almost 100 euros. Pokemon Go, not considering that because it's a weak set. Lost Origin, almost half the price difference. I know there's a lot of supply still when it comes to card market, but still, if someone has bought Lost Origin in German at the beginning, they're still way up in terms of investment, right? Silver Tempest, somewhat similar when we consider like the time aspect and the price difference, it's fairly close. Crown Zenith, still difference, but still up. If we consider MSRP was at 50 euros, so quite good on the returns. And lastly, Sun and Moon. And here you will see, I think, the biggest differences in prices and supply, so pay attention to the supply. Let's start from the top. Sun and Moon, quite similar and not much left in terms of supply. Guardians Rising, quite a good price. Burning Shadows, weak set, so the trend still holds. If it's a weak set, not that investable, but still up, right? Shining Legends. I think I saw some being bought out when I did this, so there might be a little bit of a shorter gap at this time. Crimson Invasion, even though a weak set, it's weak in both cases, but for whatever reason, since there's this Glurak effect, I think personally that's why the price is somewhat similar, or at least close. Ultra Prism 915, so it's almost half. Forbidden Light, also above 1000. Celestial Storm, almost half. Dragon Majesty, it's way lower, but it is what it is. Lost Thunder, almost above, also above the 1000 mark. Team Up. Here, German version of Team Up is even more expensive. I know it's not much, but it is more expensive. Unbroken Bonds, something similar. Unified Minds, ish similar in terms of the price gap when it comes to like the time difference and everything and the language difference, and the supply is not that high enough also. So probably things that people need to consider when we look at the trend, that whatever is happening, it somewhat mimics the price, or it's somewhere down the line, like not down the line, but borderline different in somewhere in the range of like 40 to 50% if the actual set is not that viable for investing. But the more those that are investable, they tend to at least perform well. But overall, if you feel like you want to invest, I think the English set is still a go-to. But if you are investing on a budget, it makes probably sense if you don't want that big of a return on your investment, and if that market is not that strong, like probably at this point there are not that many German buyers for, and not even locally, that have like 1,100 euros at their disposal. So probably that's something that that might take a while for you to sell, right? But if we look at the bigger picture, the longer it takes for you to hold the product, even in German, the bigger the returns are for German products. I mean, English is king, I would assume. That's the overall gist of the investing into Pokemon. Like everyone knows English, everyone knows the English equivalents, everyone collects English, even outside of Europe and US and England and English-speaking countries, Australia and I don't know, many other. So if we think about current rankings, maybe it would be a good opportunity to like explore this in some case, because I know that the Asian countries don't have the exact same box names and sets and release dates and everything, so it's a little bit harder to compare. And also like the booster boxes are smaller and cheaper in the Asian countries, at least in Japan, from what I know. Um, but overall, it would be interesting to see like a price comparison throughout the entire world and figure out like what's the biggest buying power, what are the actual what would be the actual order in terms of like the popularity when it comes to languages. In my mind, it feels like currently, if I'm speaking as a European investor, naturally English, right? Then moving somewhere along the lines of Japanese cards, not necessarily Chinese, I'm not a fan of those. Japanese I do invest in, but if I were to go down the line, I think the spillage, when if there would be like more capital flowing into the hobby, I would assume it would naturally flow more towards German. And probably it will. Maybe this video is something like a foreshadowing. I don't know. But the numbers speak for themselves. So if you are like a more conservative investor and believe in German products, I don't think you will do badly. It's just that it depends on also on your country. Like if you're living in countries that are more Eastern, where they don't speak that much German or they don't have like a German native language, I think the buying power isn't there and people wouldn't be interested. So you would have to rely on selling these cards or products more or less online. And there's a lot of the fees that go into that part, right? So if you are a German native speaker, or at least your country speaks this language, and you have that nostalgia effect, or you are being conservative, I would recommend buying German products. It might be even a good investment to look into German slabs. If there are any German PSA slabs, which might be another video for another day, but in terms of comparisons, that's really hard to compare because we don't have the data anywhere else than card market or eBay. And I think eBay is not like a good touch point to do these comparisons because I don't know how often do people buy out cards in German. But probably a good thing to research in the future. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say for today. So all in all, a summary, if you invest in German products, look at the best possible ones that might yield the biggest returns. So the best sets and not the worst sets. And that's it. So thank you for tuning in. I'm Pokemon Viking, Poke Viking with a W, and I'll see you next time.